Welcome back to our channel. Today we'll immerse ourselves in the life of this groundbreaking artist. We'll trace how a young dreamer grew up in a strict household, found his way into Motown's pantheon of stars, revolutionized soul music, and then tragically came face to face with a heartbreak that feels almost too shocking to believe. We'll go beyond the standard bullet points you might know, his big hits, his collaborations, or the shocking final chapter, and delve deeper, finding those hidden stories that reveal just how complex, vulnerable, and inspiring Marvin Gaye truly was. Sometimes a life can be defined not just by success but by struggles. Marvin Gaye's experiences illustrate that complicated dance between public glory and private pain. He became a legend precisely because he channeled all those elements of his story, love, loneliness, social awareness, longing, into timeless songs that continue to resonate. Whether you're an older fan who vividly remembers the day I heard it through the grapevine, dominated the airwaves, or someone discovering his music for the first time, Marvin's voice still speaks directly to the heart. To understand where Marvin Gaye came from, we should first travel back to mid-20th century America. Picture the years surrounding World War II, images of families rationing supplies, the country's capital filling with government workers, and a slow transformation in how African Americans were carving out their space in the nation's cultural tapestry. It was a period when the Black church often provided both spiritual guidance and a musical foundation for countless individuals. Those gospel roots ran deep. They shaped not just Sunday services, but the entire social life of many communities. Washington, D.C. in the early 1940s was segregated, with strong racial barriers impacting education, job opportunities, and neighborhood life. Still, pockets of cultural vibrancy existed. The city had a well-established Black elite, thriving historically. Black colleges like Howard University, and an active nightclub scene for jazz and R&B. For young Marvin Gaye, born Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. on April 2, 1939, this environment set the stage for a complex interplay between religious rigidity at home and the pulsating rhythms of jazz and popular music he discovered elsewhere. Marvin's father, Marvin Gaye Sr., was a strict Pentecostal preacher in the House of God Church. He held uncompromising beliefs about discipline, morality, and the roles of children. Living under the same roof with him wasn't merely a matter of abiding by household rules. It was an all-encompassing lifestyle shaped by religious adherence. Meanwhile, Marvin's mother, Alberta Gaye, was a gentle presence who tried to nurture her children's emotional well-being, even as she abided by her husband's strong religious convictions. The father's word was law, and crossing him resulted in harsh punishments. Marvin's early experiences within that stern household profoundly affected his sense of self and sense of worth. While religion brought him closer to music, he frequently sang in church choirs. This upbringing also generated a tremendous amount of psychological conflict. On the one hand, he yearned for his father's approval. On the other, he felt stifled by his father's unyielding discipline. This tension led Marvin to develop a complicated relationship with both spirituality and authority, setting the stage for many of the internal battles that would punctuate his adult life. As we zoom out on mid-century America, music was a refuge for those who faced racial discrimination and personal hardship. Jazz and blues clubs were thriving, and the seeds of what would become rhythm and blues, later evolving into soul, were being planted across the country. For Marvin, singing in church opened a door to an emotional escape he desperately needed. He discovered the emotional power of a melodic line, how a single chord progression could produce tears or elation. For the first time, he found a voice, his voice, that could command attention and evoke deep feeling. Reflecting on the era helps us see how these seemingly contradictory elements, strict gospel discipline, and the expanding possibilities of secular music intertwined in Marvin's life. His father's fervent religious devotion gave young Marvin a rock-solid background in gospel phrasing, which he later adapted to R&B and soul. But that religious environment also held him back from fully expressing himself until he left home. Like many gifted artists, he had to break away from the constraints of his upbringing before he could realize his full potential. In the late 1950s, America was witnessing the birth of rock and roll, the expansion of the civil rights movement, and the early rumblings of a major cultural shift that would peak in the 1960s. Marvin Gaye emerged in this evolving landscape, shaped by the traditions of the past but invigorated by the promise of the future. As our journey continues, we'll see how he navigated the complexities of the Motown machine, soared to the top of the charts, and used his art to ask bigger questions about life, love, and social justice. Yet, to appreciate his full story, we must accompany him through the darkest corners of his childhood. It was there that the seeds of both his artistry and his personal turmoil were planted. Let's now move chronologically through his life, weaving in the lesser-known anecdotes that, taken together, illuminate the real Marvin Gaye. Marvin's singing talent emerged early. By some accounts, he could harmonize with gospel choirs before he was even 10 years old. Church members often remarked on how this small, shy boy could command attention the moment he opened his mouth to sing. However, the applause he received in church contrasted sharply with the stern atmosphere at home. Marvin Gaye Sr. believed in strict discipline, and he expected total obedience from his children. In many interviews later, Marvin Gaye described how he lived in constant fear of incurring his father's wrath. Even a small infraction could lead to severe corporal punishment. It wasn't just the threat of punishment, though. Marvin craved a father's affirmation that never seemed to come. He often recounted how, no matter how beautifully he sang or how well he behaved, his father was rarely impressed. The elder Marvin's unwavering standards for religious conduct, coupled with a personal rigidity, seemed impossible to satisfy. This would leave an emotional mark on Marvin, instilling a need for approval and love that manifested throughout his personal relationships and in his desire to connect deeply with audiences. Outside the church, Marvin discovered another world. He began listening to doo-wop, blues, and jazz records whenever he could. He spent hours trying to replicate the harmonies of groups like the Moonglows or perfecting the smooth deliveries he heard from crooners and balladeers. His mother, Alberta, noticed how crucial music was to his emotional life and did what she could to support his interests. Secretly, she sometimes gave him pocket money to buy records or attend local concerts. While these gestures were small, they demonstrated that at least one parent believed in his gift. By the time he was a teenager, Marvin yearned to break free from his father's rules. He tried forming his own vocal groups, singing on street corners in Washington, D.C., and practicing routines in school halls. His father viewed such pursuits as frivolous or even sinful, but Marvin pressed on, determined to follow where his talent led him. At one point, he joined a doo-wop group called the Dippers, then a few others, honing his craft in an era where group harmony was a major cultural phenomenon among black youth. Yet the tension at home escalated. Marvin's father, disapproving of his secular singing, grew more distant. Arguments became more frequent and punishments more severe. Even later in life, Marvin Gaye spoke of how he never truly felt safe under his father's roof. The possibility of running away turned into a plan, and eventually it became a reality. In the late 1950s, Marvin enlisted in the United States Air Force. He was only 17, still a boy in many ways, seeking an escape and a sense of personal identity outside the watchful eye of Marvin Gaye Sr. military life, however, didn't suit him. He wasn't particularly drawn to the regimented structure, even if it was less suffocating than his father's home. Officially, Marvin was discharged in 1957 after faking mental illness, though the specifics vary depending on the source. What's certain is that the Air Force was a short-lived chapter, one that underscored a pattern in Marvin's life. He repeatedly sought escape from oppressive environments, but didn't always feel comfortable in the new situations he found himself in. Upon returning to civilian life, Marvin moved around making connections in the music world. His big break came when he caught the attention of Harvey Fuqua, the leader of the popular doo-wop group the Moonglows. Fuqua was impressed by Marvin's vocal range. His ability to tackle both tenor and deeper baritone lines was rare, and took the young singer under his wing. In 1959, Marvin found himself in Chicago with Fuqua, recording music and developing stage presence. But even then, life wasn't stable. The group disbanded in 1960, leaving Marvin at another crossroad. Soon thereafter, Detroit called his name. By the early 1960s, Berry Gordy's Motown label was on the rise, quickly making waves with chart-topping acts. Thanks to Fuqua's guidance, Marvin found himself in the orbit of Motown. Initially, Berry Gordy wasn't sure how Marvin might fit into the label's carefully curated stable of singers and groups. Marvin's style leaned more toward jazz and adult contemporary crooning at that point, rather than the pop soul formula that was Motown's bread and butter. Even so, Gordy saw the spark in Marvin, an untapped versatility that could be molded into star power. Before we move forward with Marvin's Motown story, let's dwell for a moment on a lesser-known anecdote from this period. During his early days at Motown, Marvin wanted to position himself not just as a singer, but as a drummer and composer. He admired jazz icons like Nat King Cole and Ray Charles. Rumor has it he once confided in a close friend that he envisioned himself as a suave, sophisticated performer in a tuxedo, backed by a lush orchestra. When Gordy insisted that he record more up-tempo soul tracks, Marvin reportedly felt a mix of excitement and reluctance. Excitement for the potential stardom, reluctance because he wasn't sure if that was truly him. This internal tension between artistic identity and commercial success recurred many times in Marvin's career. Eventually, he found his footing as a session drummer at Motown, and you can actually hear Marvin drumming on early tracks for artists like the Marvelettes. This behind-the-scenes role might surprise those who know him only for his vocals, but Marvin's musicianship was broad and deep. He learned so much about production and arrangement by observing Motown's famed in-house band, the Funk Brothers, and absorbing Berry Gordy's famously detail-oriented production methods. By 1962, Marvin started breaking through as a solo artist. His first album, The Soulful Moods of Marvin Gaye, attempted to show him off as a jazz and standard singer, featuring covers rather than original material. It didn't become a major hit, but it was a foot in the door. Marvin also picked up writing credits on a few songs, proving to Gordy that he was more than just a vocalist. In 1963, he recorded Stubborn Kinda Fellow, his first real Motown success, co-written with Gordy, and it soared on the R&B charts. A star was officially in the making. By the mid-1960s, Marvin Gaye was one of Motown's brightest lights. He churned out hits like How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You, I'll Be Doggone, and Ain't That Peculiar. These tracks showcased a distinct brand of soul, polished, radio-friendly, and marked by Marvin's effortless, seductive vocal style. Fans gravitated to his sincerity. He could sing a love song and make you believe every word, blending a hint of gospel fervor with a pop veneer. Even so, despite his apparent success, Marvin wrestled with insecurity. His childhood wounds and a desire for paternal approval never faded. At Motown, Berry Gordy functioned almost like a father figure, loving yet demanding, supportive yet controlling. This dynamic in some ways echoed Marvin's own father-son relationship, at least in terms of high expectations and occasional tension. Marvin found both family and friction at Motown, forging deep friendships with fellow artists like Smokey Robinson, and yet clashing with some label decisions that he felt didn't reflect his true musical aspirations. Around this time, Marvin formed a creative partnership with the brilliant singer Tammy Terrell. Their chemistry was electric, producing iconic duets such as Ain't No Mountain High Enough, Your Precious Love, and If This World Were Mine. They became one of Motown's most cherished duo acts, capturing a playful, romantic energy on stage and in recordings. Beneath the surface, however, tragedy loomed. Tammy Terrell was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and her health deteriorated rapidly. Marvin was devastated. She was not just a stage partner, but a close friend who understood him in ways few others did. When Tammy collapsed in his arms on stage at Virginia's Hampton-Sydney College in 1967, Marvin was shaken to his core. Her illness and subsequent death in 1970 left a hole in his heart that would never truly heal. He took a break from performing live and sank into a depression, plagued by guilt, grief, and a sense of disillusionment with the glitzy music world. Tammy's passing forced him to confront mortality and question the superficial elements of fame. It was a turning point, and the emotional weight he carried began to reshape his artistic direction. One of the lesser discussed consequences of Tammy's death is how deeply it contributed to Marvin's shift toward more introspective and socially conscious music. In the years leading up to this, he had been primarily known for romantic pop soul tunes. But as the 1970s arrived, the world was changing rapidly. America was embroiled in the Vietnam War. The civil rights movement was continuing to push for systemic change, and the counterculture revolution was in full swing. Marvin Gaye found himself questioning everything: the nature of love, the role of an artist in society, and his personal identity within a tumultuous world. In 1971, he released What's Going On, an album that was a radical departure for both him and Motown. Gone were the formulaic love songs. In their place were lush orchestrations and profoundly personal lyrics tackling themes like war, poverty, and racial injustice. Berry Gordy initially opposed this shift. He feared it would alienate Marvin's core fan base and hamper Motown's carefully cultivated image. But Marvin stood his ground. He poured every ounce of his musical genius, heartbreak, and hope into the title track and the resulting album. The gamble paid off. What's Going On soared to the top of the charts and became a cultural phenomenon, hailed by critics and fans alike as a masterpiece. The album's themes resonated deeply with a nation grappling with social unrest. The record wasn't just a collection of songs. It was a unified statement that introduced concept album elements to soul music. The success of What's Going On emboldened Marvin, and for a time, he found a sense of purpose that extended beyond just wanting to please an audience or a record label. Yet even as Marvin Gaye reached new heights, he still wrestled with internal struggles. He had a complicated love life, married twice, first to Berry Gordy's sister Anna Gordy, who was 17 years older, and later to Janice Hunter, who was quite a bit younger. Both relationships were marked by intense passion and equally intense conflict, reflecting his ongoing battle with self-doubt, jealousy, and the lingering emotional scars from his childhood. Marvin also grappled with substance abuse as the pressures of fame, along with unresolved pain, took their toll. Cocaine became his escape, fueling erratic behavior and further straining relationships at Motown and within his family. During the mid-1970s, Marvin's personal life grew even more chaotic. Tax troubles plagued him, leading him to spend time abroad to avoid financial ruin. He lived for a while in Hawaii, then settled in London, where he cut an enigmatic figure, an American soul superstar adrift in a foreign land. Ultimately, he found respite in Ostend, Belgium, where he tried to cleanse himself from addictions and rediscover his creative spark. Locals in Ostend remember him as polite, introspective, and surprisingly humble, often riding his bicycle along the boardwalk at odd hours, lost in thought. It was in Belgium that he recorded parts of Midnight Love, the 1982 album containing sexual healing. This track would mark his triumphant return, showcasing a sleek modern sound that combined his signature soul with then contemporary synth-driven R&B. Sexual Healing earned him his first 2 Grammy Awards, a testament to his enduring talent. For a moment, it seemed like Marvin Gaye was poised for a new chapter of success. His live performances were still electric, and the recognition he had sought for so long was finally aligning with critical acclaim. Yet the progress he made was precarious. In 1983, Marvin returned to the United States, still battling personal demons. He embarked on the Midnight Love Tour, but the tension with his father had never fully healed. Marvin's mental health deteriorated, aggravated by drug use and the stress of public life. He often expressed paranoia and fear, believing people were out to get him. In interviews, he spoke about the spiritual warfare he felt he was engaged in, a conflict fueled by the unresolved guilt, shame, and longing for paternal acceptance that had haunted him all his life. The final tragedy occurred on April 1st, 1984, one day before Marvin's 45th birthday. After a heated argument at his parents' Los Angeles home, Marvin Gaye Sr. shot and killed his son. According to accounts, Marvin had intervened in a confrontation between his father and mother. In a grim echo of the violence Marvin endured growing up, it was his father's gun that ended his life. The music world reeled in shock, unable to comprehend how a man who sang of love, compassion, and social justice could meet such a violent end at the hands of his own father. The tragedy felt almost Shakespearean, underscoring the deep familial fault lines that had long threatened to destroy Marvin Gaye. In many ways, his death seemed to confirm fears he had carried within him for years. Yet his story didn't end with that bullet. In the months and years after the shooting, legions of fans, fellow artists, and cultural commentators spoke out in tribute. The heartbreak turned into a collective mourning for the man who had voiced a generation's hopes, anxieties, and desires. Another lesser-known personal moment happened during the recording sessions for Let's Get It On in 1973. Marvin was under immense pressure from Motown to replicate the success of What's Going On. The session stretched on, with Marvin sometimes refusing to come out of the vocal booth until he felt spiritually connected to the track. A sound engineer later described how, on the night Marvin finally nailed the iconic title track, he emerged from the booth with tears in his eyes, saying, "If they don't feel this, they don't feel anything." That emotional rawness translated directly into the sensual, vulnerable energy that made the album a classic. Moreover, during his time in Ostend, he struck up friendships with locals who knew little about his fame. They recall him as a man of deep solitude, often penning letters he never sent, strolling along the shore while humming half-formed melodies. Sometimes he would invite a fisherman or a cafe owner to listen to a snippet of a new song on a tape recorder. The locals were astonished by his generosity, finding him to be simultaneously famous and approachable. One cafe owner recounted Marvin saying, "I came here to get away, but in my heart, I can't hide from myself." That line, I Can't Hide from Myself, became somewhat emblematic of Marvin's late period, a soul seeking both external and internal peace. Controversies naturally punctuated Marvin Gaye's life and career, reflecting the complex era he lived in and his own internal battles. One ongoing debate focuses on the extent to which Marvin's father, Marvin Gaye Sr., shaped or stunted the singer's development. Some argue that without the elder Gaye's strict religious upbringing, Marvin might never have developed such intense emotional depth and a spiritual core to his music. Others contend that the abuse overshadowed any benefit, contributing to Marvin's lifelong insecurities and destructive behavior. It's a nuanced debate, as Marvin himself offered conflicting statements over the years, at times expressing gratitude for his father's musical influence, and at other times decrying the cruelty he experienced. All these controversies, artistic, personal, and familial, form a mosaic that underscores the complexity of Marvin Gaye. He was neither a perfect hero nor an irredeemable figure. He was profoundly human, shaped by the times he lived in, his family's dynamics, and the music industry's demands. But why does Marvin Gaye's story still matter today? Why do we keep revisiting his life decades after he left us? For one, his cultural impact is immense. What's Going On remains a template for artists who wish to engage with social and political issues through music. From Stevie Wonder to Kanye West, musicians have cited Marvin as a guiding light for how to infuse pop music with depth and substance. His approach combined heartfelt spirituality, societal critique, and melodic brilliance, forging a path that countless artists continue to follow. On a personal level, Marvin Gaye's life can serve as both inspiration and caution. His pursuit of excellence, even in the face of personal hardship, inspires artists and dreamers to invest wholeheartedly in their passion. At the same time, his tragic end reminds us how unresolved trauma, addiction, and family conflict can unravel even the brightest star. His life story prompts discussions about mental health, family violence, and the responsibilities society and the entertainment industry have to support vulnerable individuals. And that's all for today's video. If you like this video, hit that thumbs up, let us know your thoughts in the comments section, and subscribe so you won't miss out on future uploads. See you next time.